It was late, October 2017, and the air in rural Ohio was crisp, heavy, with the smell of damp leaves and earth. My friends and I, Richard, Donna, Ethan, and Andrea, were bored out of our minds. We were all 17, seniors at Lincoln High School, and the monotony of our small town was suffocating. Halloween was a week away, and we wanted something to spice up our weekend. That's when Richard brought up the idea of sneaking into David's pumpkin patch after hours. David's was a local staple, a sprawling field about 10 miles outside of town, surrounded by dying cornfields and patches of dense woods. During the day, it was all families, hay rides, and overpriced cider. But at night, it was locked up, deserted, and creepy as hell. Richard said it'd be fun to sneak in, grab some pumpkins, and carve them under the stars. Maybe we'd scare each other, bit, laugh, and make a memory. It sounded thrilling, so we all agreed. We met up around 9:00 p.m. on a Friday. The sky was overcast, and a thick fog was rolling in, blanketing the roads in a way that made driving feel like swimming through soup. I was behind the wheel of my Ford truck, with Ethan riding shotgun and the others in the back. We parked a half-mile from the patch off a dirt road so no one would spot the car. Armed with flashlights, a couple of pocket K-knives for carving, and a backpack full of snacks, we hiked through the fog toward the field. The pumpkin patch was eerily quiet when we got there. The fog muffled everything, making the world feel small and heavy. The gate was padlocked, but Richard found a spot where the fence was low, and we climbed over one by one. My heart was pounding. Not from fear, not yet, but from the thrill of doing something we weren't supposed to. The field stretched out before us, rows of pumpkins glowing faintly orange under the moonlight, half hidden by the fog. In the distance, maybe 50 yards away, stood a scarecrow on a wooden post. It was dressed in tattered overalls with a burlap sack for a head, black holes painted for eyes. It looked creepy, but harmless, just a prop to keep birds away. "Let's grab some pumpkins and set up over there," Donna said, pointing to a clearing near the edge of the field. We spread out, picking pumpkins that weren't too big to carry. I found a nice round one, about the size of a basketball, and hauled it over to the clearing. Ethan had his pocket K-knife out and was already slicing the top off his pumpkin, scooping out the slimy guts with his hands. Andrea laughed, calling him gross, while Richard tried to fling pumpkin seeds at her. It felt like the kind of dumb fun we'd been craving. As we sat in a circle carving crude faces into our pumpkins, I kept glancing at the scarecrow. The fog made it hard to see clearly, but something about it bugged me. It looked different. It was closer than before. I shook it off, figuring it was just the fog playing tricks. But then Andrea froze, her knife hovering over her pumpkin. "Did anyone else see that?" she said. "See what?" Richard asked, smirking. "You spooked already?" "The scarecrow. I swear I saw it move like its head turned." We all laughed, but it was nervous laughter. Ethan shone his flashlight toward the scarecrow. It was still there, standing on its post, motionless. The burlap face stared blankly, the painted eyes like voids. "You're imagining things," he said, but his voice wasn't as confident as usual. "Let's focus on these pumpkins," I said, trying to change the vibe. I plunged my knife into mine, cutting the top off. The inside was wet and stringy like you'd expect. But as I scooped out the guts, my fingers brushed something hard. I pulled it out, thinking it was a weird seed, or maybe a rock. But when I held it up to my flashlight, my stomach dropped. It was a human tooth. Not a fake one, not a Halloween prop. A real yellowish tooth with a bit of dried blood at the root. "Guys," I said, holding it up. My voice was shaky. "What the hell is this?" Donna leaned over, her eyes widening. "Is that a tooth?" Before anyone could answer, Ethan yelped. He'd been digging in his pumpkin and pulled out something else. A fingernail, torn and jagged, with a bit of skin still attached. "What?" he shouted, dropping it, like it burned him. We all stared at each other, the air suddenly heavier. The fog seemed to thicken, curling around us like it was alive. Richard tried to play it cool. Okay, maybe it's a prank. Like the farmers put this stuff in there to mess with people. Yeah, sure. Andrea snapped, human teeth and fingernails. That's not a prank, Richard. I looked back at the scarecrow. It was definitely closer now. Not by much. Maybe 10 yards, but enough to make my skin crawl. Guys, I said, pointing. That thing moved. They all turned to look. The scarecrow was still on its post, but its head was tilted, slightly like it were watching us. Donna grabbed my arm. I saw it blink. I swear, I saw its eyes move. Stop it, Ethan said, but he didn't sound convinced. He stood up, shining his flashlight at it. The beam cut through the fog, illuminating the scarecrow's burlap face. For a second, I thought I saw something, too. A twitch, a flicker in those painted eyes. But then, it was still again. We need to get out of here, Andrea said. She was already grabbing her backpack, ready to bolt. Yeah, let's go. I agreed. My heart was hammering now, the tooth still clutched in my hand. I dropped it like it was cursed. We started back toward the fence, moving fast, but trying not to run. The fog was so thick now that it was hard to see more than a few feet ahead. Our flashlights bobbed, casting weak beams that barely cut through the haze. Every few steps, I glanced back at the scarecrow. It was still there. But each time I looked, it seemed closer, its silhouette sharper through the fog. I told myself it was my imagination, that scarecrows don't move. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. We were halfway to the fence when we heard it. A low, rasping sound, like someone breathing through a cloth mask. It came from behind us, where the scarecrow was. We froze, huddling together, our flashlights sweeping the field. The sound stopped, but the silence was worse. It felt like the whole world was holding its breath. Then Richard screamed. He was at the back of the group, and when I turned, I saw him stumbling, his flashlight rolling on the ground. It grabbed me, he yelled, scrambling to his feet. Something grabbed my leg. There's nothing there, Ethan shouted, but his voice cracked. He shone his light where Richard had been, and for a split second, I saw it. The scarecrow off its post, standing in the fog. Not a prop, not a costume, but something alive. Its burlap face twitching like there was a mouth moving underneath. Run, I screamed. We bolted for the fence, tripping over pumpkins and vines. The rasping sound was louder now, closer, like it was right behind us. I could hear footsteps, heavy and uneven, crunching through the field. My flashlight beam caught glimpses of the thing. Tattered overalls, a burlap sack with those black painted eyes that weren't painted anymore. They were real, wet, and gleaming. We reached the fence, and I threw myself over it, scraping my hands on the rusty wire. Donna was right behind me. Then Ethan. Andrea was struggling. Her jacket caught on a post. Richard was last, and as he climbed, something grabbed his ankle. He kicked wildly, screaming, and I saw the scarecrow, or whatever it was, reaching for him, its gloved hand clawing at his leg. Ethan grabbed Richard's arm and yanked him over, and we all tumbled to the ground on the other side. We didn't stop to look back. We ran through the fog, our breaths ragged, until we reached my car. I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking so bad I could barely get them in the ignition. As I peeled out onto the dirt road, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The fog was too thick to see much, but for a moment, I thought I saw it standing there at the edge of the field, watching us go. We didn't talk much on the drive back. Richard was pale, his ankle bruised where something had grabbed him. Andrea was crying, quietly in the back. Donna kept muttering, "It wasn't a scarecrow. It wasn't a scarecrow." I didn't know what to say. My mind kept replaying the tooth, the fingernail, the way those eyes had looked at us. When we got to town, We went straight to Ethan's house. His dad was a cop, and we told him everything. He looked skeptical, but said he'd call it in. The next morning, we heard the police had gone to David's pumpkin patch and found nothing. No scarecrow, no teeth, no fingernails, just a normal field. Fog still lingering. In the early light, they chalked it up to us being dumb kids, probably high, making up stories. But then Ethan's dad pulled me aside. He said they'd found something else, something they weren't making public. The owner of the patch, an old farmer named Harold David, hadn't been seen in weeks. Neighbors said he'd been acting strange for months, talking to himself, staying out in the fields all night. They'd found his house empty with stacks of burlap sacks and old clothes piled in the basement. And in the barn, hidden under a tarp, they found tools, knives, pliers, things you could use to pull teeth or nails. They never found Harold. The official story was that he'd wandered off, maybe lost in the woods or drowned in a creek. But we knew better. That thing in the field wasn't just a scarecrow. It was him, or something he'd become, driven mad by years alone, guarding his patch with a twisted obsession. Those teeth, those fingernails, they weren't props. They were trophies. We never went back to David's pumpkin patch. Halloween came and went, but none of us felt like celebrating. Music, there's no other way to say it. I love the fall. I always have. It's not just one thing. It's the whole package. It's the way the air in Houston finally loses that thick, wet blanket humidity of summer and gets a little crisp in the mornings. It's the smell of decaying leaves and the sound they make when you crunch through them on the sidewalk. It's the excuse to wear hoodies and drink coffee that's a little too hot. For me, the peak of all this is Halloween. My roommate Calvin and I go all out for it. We're not kids anymore. Both of us are in our mid-20s, working, jobs that are more about paying rent than following a passion. But Halloween is our thing. As soon as October 1st hits, we're dragging the big plastic tubs out of the hall closet. We have fake spider webs, plastic skeletons, strings of orange and purple lights, and a whole collection of goofy and sometimes genuinely creepy decorations we've gathered over the years. Our apartment becomes a tribute to the season. This particular year, a couple of years back, was no different. We spent a Saturday afternoon turning our two-bedroom apartment into a haunted house. We draped webs over the dull bookshelves, positioned a skeleton to be reading a newspaper on the toilet, and hung a cackling witch from the ceiling fan in the living room. It was fun, a tradition that made the place feel like home. We were both especially proud of our front porch display, which featured a couple of pumpkins we'd carved and a motion-activated ghost that would moan whenever the mailman came. Life was normal. We worked, came home, watched TV, complained about bills, and looked forward to the weekend. The comfort of that routine is something you don't appreciate until it's gone. It started on a Tuesday night in mid-October. I had stayed up a little later than usual, watching some documentary about deep-sea life that was more boring than I expected. Calvin had gone to bed hours earlier. He had an early shift at the restaurant he managed. I finally turned off the TV around 1 a.m., brushed my teeth, and crashed into bed. I'm usually a heavy sleeper, but sometimes, for no reason at all, I'll just wake up. That night, it happened. My eyes snapped open in the pitch-black room. I glanced at my phone on the nightstand. The red digital numbers glowed. 3:07 a.m., the witching hour, or so, they say. I felt a familiar, annoying urge. I had to use the bathroom. With a groan, I threw off my comforter and swung my legs out of bed. The floor was cold. My bedroom door was slightly ajar, just enough to let a sliver of ambient light from the streetlights outside filter into the hallway. I didn't bother turning on any lights as I shuffled out of my room. My apartment isn't huge. The hallway is a short, straight shot. My bedroom is on the right, Calvin's is on the left, and the bathroom and living room are at the far end. As my eyes adjusted to the dim light, I saw it, standing at the other end of the hall, just before the opening to the living room, was a figure. It was tall and perfectly still. It was wearing dark clothes, maybe a black hoodie and jeans, but it was the face that caught my attention. It was covered by a cheap, plastic Halloween mask. It wasn't anything specific, not a monster from a movie or anything. It was one of those generic blank-faced ghoul masks you can buy at any grocery store for $5, the kind with a vacant, downturned mouth and 2 black holes for eyes. My heart did a little jump in my chest, the kind of jolt you get from an unexpected noise, but it only lasted a second. My only thought was Calvin. It was exactly the kind of thing he would do. He must have picked it up from the store after work, planning to scare me with it. He probably set it up in the hall after I went to sleep, knowing I'd eventually get up to go to the bathroom. I stood there for a moment, half expecting it to jump out or for Calvin to pop out from his room, laughing. But it didn't move. Not an inch. It just stood there, a silent, motionless statue in the dark. "Real funny, Calvin," I mumbled into the quiet, my voice thick with sleep. Silence. The figure remained perfectly still. I stared at it for another 10 seconds. The blank plastic eyes seemed to absorb the faint light, making them look like deep, empty pits. It was genuinely creepy. I had to give him that. He'd outdone himself this year. I shook my head, a small smile on my face. I was too tired to deal with his prank. I walked past the figure, giving it a wide berth, just in case, used the bathroom, and walked back to my room. As I passed it again, I gave the masked head a little pat. The plastic felt cold and smooth. "Good one, man," I said before closing my bedroom door and climbing back into the warmth of my bed. I fell asleep almost instantly, thinking about how I was going to get him back. The next morning, my alarm went off at its usual 7:30. I hit snooze once, then dragged myself out of bed. The sun was streaming through my window, and the memory of the night was faint, like the tail end of a dream. I walked out into the hallway, expecting to see the creepy decoration in the bright light of day. But it was gone. The hallway was empty. I figured Calvin must have moved it before he left for work. I walked into the kitchen to make coffee and found a note from him on the counter. "Hey, we're out of milk. Could you grab some on your way home? See you tonight." I went about my morning routine, showered, got dressed, and headed out the door. The masked figure was a funny little anecdote I planned on telling my coworkers. The day was completely normal. I picked up milk on my way home from the office and got back to the apartment around 6 p.m. Calvin's car was already in the driveway. I found him on the couch scrolling through his phone. "Hey," I said, putting the bite groceries on the counter. "You got me good last night. That thing in the hallway was seriously creepy." Calvin looked up from his phone, a confused expression on his face. "What is in the hallway?" "The statue. The guy in the KB mask," I said, laughing. "Don't play dumb. I saw it when I got up to pee. You really committed to the bit, just leaving it there in the dark." His brow furrowed. He sat up, putting his phone down. "Dude, I have no idea what you're talking about. I didn't put a statue in the hallway. I stopped unpacking the groceries." "What? Yes, you did. The tall dummy with the white ghoul mask." "No, I didn't," he insisted. He looked genuinely baffled. "I didn't buy any new decorations. Why would I put it in the combination hallway?" Now I was the one who was confused. "Well, if you didn't, who did?" A strange look passed over Calvin's face. He hesitated for a second before he spoke. "Wait, you mean the statue that was in the living room?" My blood went cold. "The living room? No, it was in the hallway, right outside the bathroom." "No, it wasn't," Calvin said, his voice lowering a little. "When I came home last night around 11, it was in the living room. It was standing right over there, next to the TV. I figured you set it up. I thought it was a weird place for it, but I was tired and just went to bed. We stared at each other for a long moment. The hum of the refrigerator seemed to get louder. The goofy decorations hanging around the room suddenly didn't feel so fun anymore. Calvin, I'm being serious, I said slowly. I saw it in the hallway at 3:00 the morning. And I'm being serious, he shot back, his eyes wide. I saw it in the living room at 11. I never touched it. I thought it was yours. The implication of what we were both saying settled over us like a physical weight. We both saw it. We both assumed the other was responsible. But if neither of us had bought it, and neither of us had set it up, then who did? And how did it move from the living room at 11 p.m. to the hallway at 3 a.m.? The only possible answer was that it hadn't been a statue at all. It was a person. A real living person had been inside our apartment while we were home. A person who had stood motionless in our living room for who knows how long. A person who had later moved to the hallway to stand silently in the dark for hours just watching. Watching what? Waiting for what? I thought about how I had walked right past him, how I had patted his head. A wave of nausea washed over me. Check the doors, Calvin said. We scrambled around the apartment in a panic. The front door was locked. The sliding glass door to the back porch was locked. All the windows were shut and locked from the inside. Nothing was out of place. Nothing was stolen. Our laptops were on the coffee table. The TV was still on the wall, and our wallets were on the kitchen counter. Nothing was touched. It made no sense. Why would someone break in just to stand there? Then a thought hit me. A cold, sharp spike of fear. The key, I said. The spare key. We had a spare key hidden under a loose brick on the edge of the front patio. We'd had it there since we moved in for emergencies. We both ran outside, our hearts pounding. I knelt and pulled the brick away. The small hollowed-out space underneath was empty. The key was gone. We called the police. An officer came by about an hour later. He was a middle-aged man with a tired look on his face, and he listened patiently as we frantically tried to explain what had happened. I could tell from his expression that he thought we were either drunk or crazy. So, you're saying a man in a Halloween mask was in your apartment? He repeated, writing slowly in his notepad. And he didn't take anything or harm you in any way. He just stood there. Yes, I said, feeling stupid, even as the words came out of my mouth. And our spare key is missing. The officer took a look around the apartment. He checked the locks, shone his flashlight into the closets. Of course, he found nothing. There was no sign of forced entry. There was no evidence that anyone had been there at all, other than our terrifying shared story. He gave us a form to fill out and a case number. I'd recommend you get your locks changed first thing in the morning, he said as he was leaving, and maybe find a better hiding spot for your spare. We did. We called a 24-hour locksmith that very night and paid an absurd amount of money to have every lock in the apartment changed. We didn't sleep that night. We left every light on and sat in the living room together, jumping at every creak and groan the old building made. It's been 2 years since that night. We never found out who it was or why they were in our apartment. There were no similar reports in the neighborhood. It was just a single, inexplicable event. We moved out of that apartment 6 months later. I couldn't stand it anymore. Every time I woke up in the middle of the night, I was terrified to open my door, scared of what I might see standing in the hallway. The scariest part, the thing that I can't get out of my head, is the stillness. This wasn't a frantic robbery or a violent attack. It was quiet, patient, and calm. Someone wanted us to know they could get in. They could get to us whenever they wanted. They could stand a few feet from our beds while we slept, and we would never even know. They didn't take our stuff. They took our sense of security, and that's something you can never get back. Music. I moved to the small town of Ashbrook in late September, trying to start fresh after a rough year. My old job had laid me off. Rent was getting too high, and I needed a change of pace. Ashbrook wasn't much. A quiet place with a single main road, one diner, a gas station, and a pass. Few stores that closed before 8. It was the kind of town where everyone waved when they passed you, even if they didn't know your name. I rented a small room above a hardware store on Maple Street. The owner was an older man named Bill, who gave me a discount if I helped out around the shop. My days were slow, but peaceful. I'd drink coffee on the private porch, listen to the trains pass in the distance, and walk around town just to kill time. One thing I noticed early on was how the locals talked about October. Everyone seemed to look forward to it, not for Halloween itself, but for something they called the Ashbrook Bonfire. From what I gathered, it was an old tradition. Every fall, local teens and young adults would hike deep into the woods past the old water tower, where there was a clearing. They'd set up a huge bonfire, bring food, soda, and speakers, and spend the night telling stories, or just hanging out until dawn. It wasn't an official town event, more like something passed down between generations. A week before Halloween, a guy came into the hardware store while I was helping Bill restock. He looked a few years younger than me, maybe mid-20s, wearing a brown flannel and muddy boots. He introduced himself as Derek and said he'd just moved back into town after a few years away. We talked for a bit, mostly small talk about how quiet the place was. Before leaving, he mentioned the bonfire. "You should come," he said. "They're doing it this weekend. It's pretty fun if you're new around here." I told him I might. He smiled and said, "It's past the water tower down a dirt trail. You'll see cars parked along the way. You can't miss it." Something about how easily he invited me felt welcoming. So, that Saturday night, I decided to go. The drive out there was darker than I expected. The farther I got from town, the fewer streetlights there were. My headlights cut through thick trees that looked like walls on both sides of the road. After about 15 minutes, I saw the faint glow of fire between the trees and a few parked trucks off to the right. I pulled over, grabbed a jacket, and followed the path downhill. The sound of music and laughter got louder until I reached the clearing. It was wide open, ringed with tall trees that swallowed the moonlight. The fire in the center was massive, at least 10 feet high, built from stacked pallets and old logs. Sparks floated upward and vanished in the dark. Around it were about 20 or 30 people talking, drinking, and taking pictures. I spotted Derek near one of the trucks. He waved when he saw me. "Glad you came, man," he said, handing me a red cup. "This is kind of like our big event of the year." Everyone seemed friendly enough. A few people asked where I was from, what brought me here, and how I liked small-town life. The atmosphere was relaxed. Some people danced near the fire, others sat on coolers or logs, and a couple of older guys grilled burgers off to the side. After an hour, someone turned the music down, and people started gathering closer to the fire. A girl with a denim jacket said, "All right, it's story time." It felt like a tradition. One by one, people started telling local ghost stories, tales about the old cemetery, a haunted bridge, a man who vanished near the lake. Most were more funny than scary. Then Derek stood up. He looked serious, holding his drink, but not touching it. "All right," he said, "this one's real local. You probably haven't heard it." Everyone quieted down. Even the fire seemed to settle. He started talking about something called hawthorn wood. He said, Longa farmers in Ashbrook believed burning hawthorn in a fire was bad luck. They said it called something out, Derek explained. A watcher. It doesn't show itself unless the wood burns hot enough. People chuckled. A few threw in sarcastic oohs. Derek smiled faintly. They said it comes when you're not paying attention. He continued. Walks the edge of the firelight. You might see a shadow. You might hear it. Copy your voice. That's how you know it's close. His tone was so calm it almost made it creepier. When he finished, someone joked, "Guess we better not throw any hawthorn in there." Another guy laughed and said, "How would we even know what that is?" Derek shrugged. "Guess we'll find out." Everyone went back to talking and drinking. The fire popped loudly, sending sparks up into the sky. I remember standing near the edge of the group, watching the flames, when a strong, bitter smell hit my nose. It wasn't like oak or pine. It smelled sharp, like green wood burning too fresh. I saw Derek toss in a thick branch with long thorns still on it. Someone asked what it was, and he said casually, "Just some scrap I found on the trail." About 20 minutes later, strange things started happening. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but the sound came from the treeane, a soft voice saying something faint. I couldn't catch the words, but it sounded like a whisper repeating itself. A few people turned to look. "You guys hear that?" a girl asked. Everyone paused. The woods went silent. Then, the same voice repeated, "Don't burn that." It wasn't loud. It was distant, but clear. Someone laughed nervously. "All right, who's out there?" No answer. "Probably some kids trying to mess with us," another guy said. But then it happened. Again. Same voice, same words. Only this time, it sounded like it came from a different spot in the woods. "Don't burn that." The crowd shifted uneasily. Phones came out. Flashlights clicked on. The beam stretched into the trees but showed nothing. I could feel the mood changing. People weren't laughing anymore. Someone shouted, "We know you're there. Knock it off." The fire cracked loudly, sending a wave of heat across the clearing. Then, from just beyond the light, a figure stepped between the trees. He wore a hooded jacket, face hidden, standing completely still. The flickering light only caught the edge of his outline. He didn't move. Closer. "Who the hell is that?" someone hissed. Another voice from the woods repeated, "Who the hell is that?" It was mimicking him. Exactly. A few people backed away. One guy shouted, "That's not funny, man," and threw a can in the direction of the figure. It disappeared into the dark. The figure didn't react. Then it took one slow step sideways like it was circling the clearing. A girl started crying softly. Someone turned their flashlight that way, but the beam caught only trees. "Let's go," a voice said. "Let's get the hell out of here." People started moving toward their vehicles. The mood flipped from party to panic in seconds. I followed, my heart pounding. When we reached the line of trucks, a guy tried to start his engine. It made a few choking sounds, but didn't turn over. Another tried. Same thing. One girl screamed, "My tire's flat." We checked others. Every single car had slashed tires, clean cuts along the side. Someone gasped, "What the hell? Who did that?" Nobody answered. In the dry distance, faint chanting started. It wasn't music. It wasn't random noise. It was slow, low, and rhythmic, like people mumbling in sync. The sound came from the woods, maybe 30 yards out, moving around us. Every direction we turned, it echoed from somewhere else. The girl in the denim jacket pulled out her phone and said, "I'm calling the police." Her voice was shaking but steady enough. She told them the location, the woods past the water tower, where a group was being harassed. They said a unit would be there as soon as possible. About 30 minutes. 30 minutes felt like a lifetime. We huddled together near the fire. The chanting grew louder, closer. Then it stopped. Total silence again. A guy picked up a metal rod from near the grill and held it like a weapon. "If they come out, I'm not running," he said, though his voice cracked halfway through. No one responded. Everyone's eyes were on the trees. Then came a sound like twigs snapping from behind the cars. Someone turned their flashlight and caught a glimpse of movement. 2 hooded figures ducking out of sight. Back up. Stay. Together, the denim girl shouted. We slowly moved toward the center of the desk, clearing near the fire where the light was strongest. I could see Derek standing on the opposite side, hands in his jacket pockets, just watching. He looked almost calm. Derek, I called out, what the hell is happening? He didn't answer. He just turned and looked toward the woods where the chanting had started. Again, something about his body language, how he wasn't scared, made my stomach twist. Then, in one quick motion, he stepped backward into the trees and disappeared. The chanting grew louder immediately. It clicked for me then. He wasn't running away. He was joining them. For the next half hour, we stayed close, gripping anything that could be used as a weapon. Every rustle made someone flinch. Once, we saw the faint beam of a flashlight sweep through the trees, but it wasn't ours. It was someone moving out there. When the police finally arrived, the relief was overwhelming. Their cruiser headlights cut through the woods, and the siren gave the first real sense of safety we'd had all night. 2 deputies stepped out with flashlights and asked what had happened. We explained as best we could. People in the woods, voices, chanting, cars, sabotaged. They checked the vehicles and confirmed every tire was sliced open. The deputies shone their lights into the trees, but didn't see anyone at first. Then, one of them said quietly, "There are footprints back here." We followed behind them at a distance as they traced the prints deeper into the woods. They led down a narrow path almost hidden by leaves. About 200 yards in, one deputy stopped and said, "There's a light ahead." We came to a small clearing where a rundown cabin sat crooked among the trees. Its roof sagged, and one of the windows was boarded up. A faint light flickered inside like a lantern or candle. The deputies told everyone to stay back. They approached the door, guns drawn, and shouted, "Sheriff's Department, come out with your hands up." No response. They kicked the door open. I could only see shadows moving inside, then muffled shouting. A few minutes later, 2 hooded men were led out in handcuffs. One of them was Derek. He didn't resist. He just kept staring at the ground. The deputies searched the cabin and found a trap door beneath a rug. When they opened it, there was a narrow wooden ladder leading down. They went in with flashlights. Moments later, one of them called up, "There's more down here." When they pulled the others out, there were 3 more men, faces covered, dressed the same way as the figures we'd seen circling us. In one corner of the basement was a small pile of stolen wallets, phones, and car keys. They had been planning to rob us, maybe worse. One of the deputies turned to us and said, "You're lucky someone called when they did." I remember the girl in the denim jacket crying quietly, hugging her friend. Some of the guys just stood there in shock, staring at Derek as they put him in the cruiser. He looked at us once before getting in, and his expression never changed, just cold, like he didn't feel a thing. By sunrise, the police had taken statements and towed the disabled vehicles back to town. They said the men had been hiding in that cabin for days, planning to hit the bonfire because it was remote and easy to isolate. I got a ride back with one of the deputies. The road out of the woods looked different in daylight, less mysterious, but still unsettling. When I looked in the side mirror, I could still see the faint column of smoke from the bonfire rising between the trees. I thought about how easily it could have gone the other way, how close we'd been to something far worse. That night, I sat on the porch of my small room over the hardware store, still smelling the smoke in my clothes. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that hooded figure at the edge of the fire, standing perfectly still. Since then, I've avoided anything that involves being in the woods after dark.